as you seek to experience more healing, freedom, and transformation in your life. You're going to have to become more aware of the power of your thought life. And in my work with people, many times we come across certain ways of thinking, and we often find ourselves asking the question, who told you this? Or where'd this thought come from? Because we often assume that every thought we have is just our own. Many times we think that thoughts just come out of thin air. We forget there's a war and there's a battle going on, and that war is waging over what thoughts are we going to pay attention to, give our focus on. And so sometimes it's helpful to just go, wait a second, who told me that? A great example of this is when God came to Adam. Adam and Eve ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and all of a sudden they're running into the bushes and they're hiding in their shame and in their fear. And Adam says, I'm naked and I was afraid. He's got all these thoughts and all these emotions flooding his system. He has no idea where they came from. And God brings out a question to Adam that I think is important for you to ask yourself today. He says, who told you that? And many times in your journey, you bump up against certain ways of thinking. Maybe they're based on fear. Maybe they're based on deep self-hatred, or maybe they're based on certain rejection patterns in how you see the world. Maybe they're survival mechanisms. There's certain patterns in the way you do life that keep you more in survival, and they don't really allow you to thrive. You think they serve you, but really they're boxing you in. They're probably imprisoning you. And so it may be a good exercise for you today to go, wait a second, who told me to think this way? So if you want some application and say, well, Mark, how do I do this? Here's some suggestions to just kind of get you started. We could certainly go in a bunch of other different directions. But when it comes to the question of who told me this? Well, I want to give you a roadmap where you can begin to learn, all right, how did these thinking patterns begin in our life? That's really the first question. When you look at a certain thinking pattern, maybe it's an anxiety, or maybe it's a way that you defend yourself. Maybe it's a stubbornness. Maybe it's a no one loves me. Maybe it's a neediness. You're recognizing this thought pattern. Ask yourself, when did it start? Don't feel that you have to be so introspective and staring at your navel for 20 years. Just let it bubble to the surface. When we allow the love and grace of God to be the atmosphere that we carry, these questions are a lot easier. I don't want you to be hard on yourself, no beating yourself up, no blaming people. Just kind of going, when did this start? God, would you reveal this to me? Another question is, who in my family mirrors this way of thinking? In other words, you kind of see them in agreement with the same pattern. It's a defeating pattern. You can see it's not a healthy pattern, but nonetheless, it's one that family member lives in it. Or maybe you see a bunch of family members. Maybe you see this, wow, this is a generational thing that's been in my family for quite some time. A third question is, what events in life reinforce this way of thinking? Maybe you had a certain fear mechanism come in when you were a kid, and you live out of that as a way of self-survival. And then there are times in life where you say, see, because of that event, I had to live that way. I have to be this. Because many of our toxic agreements, we hold on to them. I have to defend myself. I have to look out for me because no one looks out for me, right? I'm always going to be on my own, or people don't love me, or I'm never safe. All these things that can have some factual evidence in our history. It's not the truth that sets us free that Jesus talked about, because every truth that comes from Christ, that's rooted in God, is going to provide more freedom. You shall know the truth shall make you free. Some translations say set you free, right? The power of truth that God has brings freedom. But a lot of our agreements don't bring freedom. But we have certain events in life that stack up, that give us this sense of, yeah, I have to keep thinking that way in order to survive. And that can become a real turning point for people in their journey. Another question to ask is, how has it become a part of, quote, who you are? Now, I'm not saying these thoughts are who you are, but a lot of times we take certain thought patterns, they become a part of our identity. We say, well, this is just the way that I am. We just chalk it up to that. It's just the way that I am. I say, well, wait a second. Is that really true? What does God say about my identity? And that's where you can begin to go into a journey. I recommend this for anyone who's really wanting to enhance their thought life. Do a study in God's Word about what He says about His children, what He says about us. Go through the book of Ephesians. Go through different aspects of Paul's writings. Go into what John says in 1 John about who we are as sons and daughters, right? Begin to develop a template. Peter said this. He said, we're a chosen generation, royal priesthood, proclaiming praises of God. Okay, there's a picture of who you are. All right, those are some examples. Let's say, how have I become? Because I became one in my identity with certain ways of anxiety. And I said, well, this is the way that I am now. And then I began, as God's Word exposed, no, that's not the way I created you. It gave me a better vision of what God sees in me that I'm growing into, right? But number 5 is a very, very critical statement. It may not apply to every thought that you have in your life, but some of them, you may want to say, well, what will it cost me if I continue to think this way? For example, I had certain relational patterns that needed to be confronted. Some of them were based in obsessive compulsive thought battles, relational obsessive thoughts, fear-based thoughts, rejection-based thoughts that I would cycle in, big victim thinking, self-pity. And I had to come to the deep realization in my heart to ask myself, okay, what's this going to cost me if I keep thinking this way? What's it going to cost me in the long term if I stay thinking as a victim, that life works against me, I can never catch a break? What's it going to do if I stay in this anxiety-ridden, obsessive-compulsive pattern in relationships? And I got a sober view of where it will go, and that gave me a deeper awakening of God, I want to invite you into this to bring about change. Whatever it takes, wherever we have to go, whatever I have to learn, whatever I have to go through, I want the greater potential, because if I stay in this, I see where it can lead me. So anyway, I pray that this just adds life, value, and some tools to begin to help lead you into greater transformation. Be sure to get a copy of my book, The Heart Healing Journey, and many of our other resources, and I look forward to seeing you in future content.